Hey crafty friends, my name is Jennifer and I'm back with a new paper crafting tutorial in which I want to show you how I created this cute pop-up box card featuring the super adorable tiny gift box peacock add-on by Lawn Fawn. This card style was inspired by a project that I saw on Instagram, and you can find the link to it in the info box below. And you can also find a supply list and timestamps in case you want to skip a section of the tutorial or rewatch a part of it. This video is essentially split into two parts. First, the technique section where I explain the mechanism and how to build it. And second, the card making section where I show you how I created this peacock card. I'm so happy that you're joining me for this tutorial and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. When I showed this card on Instagram, many of you got curious how I did that to form a box by pulling a pull tab. And you can see this one creates this cute whale that I created using the Lawn Fawn Tiny Gift Box Whale and Dolphin add-on. It's super adorable. And I created this tutorial to show you how I did that. I started with the tiny gift box that I die cut from white cardstock, and we don't need the tabs. So this rounded tab is the one that you use to close the box, and then there are 3 tabs to either side of this long piece, and we can remove all of those 7 tabs. I'm just using my scissors to cut them off. And then we can fold the box along the score lines that the die creates. And I use my bone folder to reinforce those folds. Then we need holes to thread string through that will help us to make this mechanism work. And you can see on my whale that there are several holes visible. And I marked the positions of these holes with a pencil, and I hold that in the camera so that you can take a screenshot in case you want to. And now I'm using a hole punch. I think it's a 1/16 of an inch hole punch to punch the required holes. For my whale card, I use nylon thread because it's invisible, but for this tutorial I'm using black thread to make it easier to see what's going on. And only this single rectangle will be adhered to the card. And for my whale card, however, I didn't glue it onto the front. Instead, I cut a small slit in my front panel and attached the rectangle behind it for a cleaner look. But I'm laying or placing my flat piece on the card panel to show you how it folds into a box. And this allows us to see how we have to thread the strings through the holes. So I'm starting with the holes on the rectangle that will be adhered. And I'm starting from outside the box and feed it towards the inside of the box. So I'm going up, and for the next hole I'm going down. And for the next hole I will go up again and then down, just alternating. And I'm going all around the box until I reach the first rectangle again. Then I'm using some tape runner to adhere the piece to my work surface to show you how it folds into a box when you pull the strings. It's like magic, isn't it? Alrighty, now we can adhere our box to a card. And here I have a standard A2 card panel, and I'm adhering the rectangle to the top of the card and show you how it works, and in comparison the whale. And now I want to show you how I created that slit to hide my rectangle behind the card front. And after making sure that everything is straight, I will need to mark the position of that fold line. And to make it easier to see for you, I'm drawing a line right into that fold. And then I'm drawing 2 little marks, one left and one right of that fold. And then after removing the box from the card panel, I can use an X-Acto knife to cut a slit between the two marks that I drew. And I'm actually making two cuts to cut a little sliver from my card panel, which will make it easier to slide the rectangle into it. And as you can see, it fits perfectly. However, I can't attach it just yet. I first need to punch two holes in the card base, as you can see with my whale card here. And to do this, I position the rectangle exactly where I want it to go, mark the spots for the two holes with a pencil, and then use my hole punch to make the two holes. Now I can attach the rectangle behind my card base, and since I'm attaching it to the back, the adhesive needs to be on the opposite side of the rectangle accordingly. And now when I'm attaching it, I make sure that the holes line up perfectly, and then I can thread my strings through the holes. And it becomes increasingly similar to our whale card, doesn't it? The next step is to create the square panel behind which I can hide the flat cross-shaped box. And to do this, I first need to measure the width and the height of the flat box, which are both 3 3/4 of an inch. So I cut a 3 3/4 of an inch by 3 3/4 of an inch square out of thin paper, and it fits perfectly onto our flat box. And to ensure that I can still shape the box after attaching the square, I need to fold this paper, as you can see with our whale card here. And to find out where I have to score my square, I need to measure the outer rectangles of my box, which are 1 1/8 of an inch long. And they're all the same. This means I need to score my square on all 4 sides, measuring 1 1/8 of an inch from the outer edge. And using my ruler and my pencil, I've measured 1 1/8 of an inch inwards from each corner and made a mark. And just as a little side note, I have to do that with a ruler and a pencil because none of my scoreboards provide this specific increment. Something I really want to upgrade, since it's obviously easier if you don't have to rely on manual marks, but it worked out fine. So first I created the 4 score lines for my square and then reinforced them with a bone folder. And then I checked if it fits into my box, and as you can see, I did a good job with the measurements. Next I need to create the diagonal score lines, just like I did for my whale card. And as a little tip, I drew a line with a white pen right into the 8 centimeter groove of my scoreboard, which helps me to align the two opposite corners in the same groove. And I'm making sure not to score the whole diagonal. I create 2 score lines from the corner to the point where it meets the previous score lines. And I'm doing the same thing for the other 2 corners. And here are all of our score lines. Now I'm folding the diagonal lines. And to do that, I fold one side over and then push the other side in and over. I think that's the easiest way to reinforce those diagonal lines. And I'm doing the same thing for all 4 of them. Now we can finally adhere our square to the flat box. However, we need to be careful to leave certain areas free of glue, because that section of the thread moves while the box is being formed. In other words, when you pull the strings, the string shifts upward within that rectangle. I'll try to show you that though the box isn't being very cooperative. I'll demonstrate it more clearly in a moment after I've marked the no glue zone. Hopefully you can see it better here, how the thread slides from its starting position to the other end of that marked area. So that means to avoid interfering with the mechanism, we must not apply any glue in these sections. And naturally the same thing applies to the rectangle on the opposite side, where the exact same thing happens. Now we can apply adhesive to the remaining parts of the flat box, and I'm using liquid glue to have some time to wiggle my square into place, because the folds of the square need to line up with the folds of the box. And you can see the parts without glue that are not adhered. Same thing is true for my wall box. I did the same here. And now I can pull the strings to form the box. You might help the box a little bit the first time, so it needs a little bit of training, but that looks pretty good. And then I can repeat that several times and it will become easier with every pull. Next, I want to show you how I created the pull tab for my card. I used this die from the Over the Rainbow die set, and I created a fold with a notch so that you can fold over the pull tab when displaying the card, because I think it looks a little silly to have it displayed with this long pull tab sticking out. I cut the pull tab from heavyweight white cardstock. I actually used 2 or 3 pieces for my way card. Now I need to cut 2 holes into my pull tab, and to find the correct position I aligned it with the card in the position that I wanted to be eventually, and then used a pencil to mark the position of the 2 holes. Used my hole punch to create the 2 holes, and then I can feed my string through them. Then I can pull the strings tight while the box is all flat. So this is the close position. I'm adhering my pull tab to its position so that it's easier to handle. I have my box all flat, and then I can tie my strings into a knot and adhere them to the pull tab. Next, I want to stabilize my pull tab so that it moves up and down in a straight line. And to do this, I create a little sleeve or belt, and I'm just using a piece of cardstock for that and sliding it as high up as possible. And then I'm folding both sides over the pull tab, not too tight. And then I'm using some glue to adhere the two ends together. But you should also adhere that to the card, which I forgot and noticed it right here. So back to the beginning. So you first put some adhesive at the back of it, then adhere it to the card, and then close it. And by the way, this sleeve or belt can be as long as you want it to be. And now you can see it moves straight up and down, but you can also see that it's a little low, so that the pull tab could slip out of it, but I will fix that a little later. Before that, I want to show you how I created the fold over feature of the pull tab. And I'm pulling it out as far as it needs to go. And then I use my pencil to mark the end of the card, so where I need to create my fold. And I opened my sleeve and removed my pull tab to create the score line using my scoreboard. And I don't score it all the way, just a bit from the left and the right, and leave the center unscored because I want to create a tab, as I did with my wear card here. I'm briefly pausing the video here for a little side note, because you might wonder why I created this tab. And the idea behind this behind it is that this pull tab is pretty thick and didn't want to fold nicely, and this little tab should prevent it from flipping back up when you fold it over. But I don't think that it's really necessary. So instead you can just do a straight score line and fold the whole pull tab over. I left it in the video so that you can see how I did it, and you can choose whether you want to do it or not. But I think for my next card I will just skip this step and do a straight score line. Okay, let's continue with the video. And now I'm creating the mentioned tab, just using a craft knife, which is a pretty easy way to do it. And I also cut a notch at the top of my card panel. And then I can fold my pull tab. So you can see that when I fold it over, this little tab sticks out because we didn't score it there. And that finishes our pull tab. I mentioned before that I wanted to shift up my sleeve a little bit, since I was afraid that the pull tab could slip out, because I need to pull it out quite far. And because of the strings, I can't shift it higher, so I have to cut out a piece of it to avoid the strings. And as you can see here, I'm avoiding the strings, and I can shift it up until the top of the card. So now I'm pressing it down and close it, and that finishes the pull tab mechanism. Well, almost. I obviously have to adjust my notch that I didn't cut pretty carefully. But now we're done. So that's it. That's the whole magic behind the wire card. And to give you a little bit more insights, I created another card using another tiny gift box add-on, and I hope you like it. I already prepared some components for my card, like the background and the body of the peacock, the tail and the face, as well as some other details like the wings and the feet and so on. I also have my square already cut and fold, and this sentiment that I cut from pearlescent vellum, and to attach it I used double-sided adhesive. You can find this from Lawn Fawn or Altenew. And I attached that to the back of my vellum piece before die cutting it. Further, I die cut this little label and white heat embossed a sentiment onto it, and stamped, colored and die cut this little peacock. Then I have my pull tab cut from white cardstock several times. I ink blended the top one with using the same ink color that I used for my background, and I ended up just using one additional white one. And here you can see the peacock before and after stamp set that I used for the stamped peacock and the sentiment. This cute label is part of the small stitched envelope die set. And I used the grassy pasture backdrop landscape for my background. And over the rainbow die for the pull tab. The giant You Did It for the sentiment, and the tiny gift box with the peacock and turkey add-on. And I used the cheeks from the panda and bear add-on. I chose the peacock because I haven't used it yet and because it's super adorable, but you can use pretty much any of the tiny gift box add-ons, but you need to be careful with some of the pieces. So you can see that this leg piece of the horse and unicorn add-on is longer than this part of the box. Same thing for the side piece of this ghost. So you can see that it produced the length of this rectangle of the box. So you might have to cut them shorter or get creative in the way you use them. But if you keep that in mind, you can use any of those add-ons for this card design. I start to assemble my card the same way I showed it in the model part before. I adhere my box to the back of my card front, I already cut the slit and all the holes. I find my card panel to be a little flimsy because of all the cut details, so I decided to adhere another A2 panel on its back to make it a little more sturdy. And then I just have to recut the holes. And now I want to cut the notch for my pull tab. And there is a die included in the Over the Rainbow die set that is meant to cut a notch, but there is a stitch detail very close to this cut line, so that it would make it difficult to partially die cut it without transferring this detail. So instead I decided to use this die for the decorative tab to cut the notch. And to determine the correct position where to cut it, I place the pull tab in its eventual position and temporarily tape it in place, and then I can align my die to create the notch. And of course I have to remove the pull tab before die cutting it. And just a little tip for die cutting: since we already adhered the box, we don't want to place our cutting plate over the whole piece. Instead, let it end before the box. Otherwise the box could leave an impression on the background, and by placing the plates like I showed, we can avoid that. Next, I'm laying my pull tab in its correct position and temporarily adhere it to cut the 2 holes into it. So I first marked them with a pencil and then used my hole punch to cut them. And since I don't really like the nylon thread that I used last time, I decided to use some green floss. And I made a little hook with a piece of wire that I use instead of a needle to help me get the string through the holes. And then I can adhere my string to the back of the pull tab using some tape. And then I'm adhering my additional pull tab piece on top of it to make it a bit sturdier. And after the glue has dried, I created the probably unnecessary tab in my pull tab. And I started in the same way I showed you in the model part. But this time I don't cut my tab with a craft knife. Instead I use a die. And I even used my die as a straight edge to draw a line that I will use to line up my notch die. And after the rather fiddly process of die cutting this tab, I can score the 2 outer ends using my scoreboard. And then fold it over. Now we can create our belt or sleeve, and this time I'm using a much wider piece of cardstock. The process is exactly the same. I'm folding the 2 ends over the pull tab. One side is a little too long, so I have to cut it down. And I'm checking if it fits. And then I learned I'm adhering my sleeve to my card. But first I need to cut out a little notch so that I can adhere it to the top of my card without getting in the way of the strings. And now I can close it. And another little tip: don't put the adhesive right next to the pull tab. It's better to leave some room so that you don't inadvertently adhere it to your pull tab. So I even redid that to show you where I placed my glue. And that works wonderfully and finishes our pull tab. Next, I'm working on the square. I decorated it with a confetti stencil by Lawn Fawn. And now I determine where to place my sentiment. I'm using this stamp as a placeholder, even though I ultimately use another stamp. But it helped me to find the correct position for my die. And after I adhered it, I used the release paper from the double-sided adhesive sheet to firmly press it down. And then I'm reinforcing all the folds to also fold the sentiment. Then I stamped and white heat embossed the little yay and adhered it over the "you did it." And I'm stacking an additional piece behind the peacock before adhering it to the label. And now I'm assembling my peacock. And it's going to be so adorable. And these are the two kinds of pearls that I used. I actually adhered them using liquid glue off screen later. To create the peacock's tail, I actually used this piece and cut it from thin copy paper, and then I cut the feathers and attached them onto the centerpiece from both sides. And then I used this detail piece and cut it from yellow sparkle and blue sparkle cardstock, and then I adhered them to both sides. And I used all the parts, the yellow ring and the blue center for the front and the reverse for the back. Now I'm adhering my square, and I'm making sure to avoid putting glue on the sections where my string needs to move. And then I can adhere the little label that I created with the additional sentiment and the little stamped peacock. I want to adhere a decorative tab to the top of my pull tab, and I cut the main part from green cardstock and the arrow from light aqua. And I noticed that I forgot to adhere the little feet to my peacock. Isn't he the cutest? He definitely is. The last thing that I need to do is to adhere my panel to a card base, and instead of using foam tape, I use several layers of cardboard that I have from packaging, and I'm marking the position of the pull tab to cut this out of my cardboard panel, and then I'm creating several layers of this to stack on top of each other and glue around my pull tab. And then I can adhere it to my card base. I have to make sure to not have any adhesive at this part of the pull tab that is showing, because I don't want to get it stuck. And here's the finished card. You can pull the tab to create a super cute peacock. I'm showing it you from a better angle. So cute. And the pull tab folds nicely over so that you can display it. Here's a little close-up. And here's the way card. That was the reference and a little model that we created at the beginning. So in here I'm showing you the whale and the peacock from several angles. And that finishes my video. Thank you so very much for watching this video. I hope it was helpful and that you might try this kind of card. And if you like the video, I would be delighted if you could give it a like or a thumbs up so that YouTube will show it to other card makers as well. And I hope you have a wonderful day and to see you again next time. Bye bye.